Hello, everybody. So glad you guys are here hanging out with us today on what is Memorial Day, a very special holiday here in the United States. So, if you're here with us live, that's great. Thank you for being here. If you're watching the video later, good to have you too. All right. So, for those of you who are here live, you can ask any questions you like about the topic of improvising in the chat, and we will answer as many of these as we can. So today's topic is 5 easy ways to improvise better guitar solos. So many of you are improvising already and you got started with that. Some of you are quite experienced. Some of you might be starting out. We're going to give you 5 easy ways to make this easier to improvise better solos. So I brought in a very special guest today, someone who specializes in actually many things, but one thing in particular is improvising, and that is my friend James Maxwell. Hello, James. Let's see. There you are. Hello,
Hey,
James.
good to see you.
And
Nice to see
James
you.
runs a very successful music school up in Michigan. So, James, I brought you here. Thanks for coming, by the way, because I know how skilled you are at lead guitar, improvising, phrasing, improvising, all that stuff. And so, as you know, we're going to go through whatever are your 5 suggestions, 5 easy ways to improvise better solos. So, James, you teach many guitar players to become really awesome students, and everyone knows that you've built, and now they know, they didn't already, that you built this incredible music school up there in your part of the country. And since improvising guitar is one of your specialties, I wanted to ask you to share your 5 easy ways to improvise better guitar solos. So maybe you can share your 5 secrets, 5 tips, whatever, 5 approaches that you've used with the students that you have. So let's just go, one at a time. We can begin with your number 5.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. It's really good to be here. And a great way to think about this is because there are so many students, and of these students, you start to realize that these issues of having trouble improvising or playing better solos, they're not common to any one individual. They are the same issues for the guy who's just starting off and a dude who's been playing for 25 years, just maybe at slightly different levels. But the fundamental part of it is still the same. So what we're going to talk about are the 5 tips I have because they're based off the 5 biggest problems I see. And they are in order as well. Because I thought, well, I'm listing these things out. If I had to take away any one of these things, could I still play a fairly decent solo? And the first one, the answer was absolutely not. I could not play a decent solo without this. So if you do nothing else, do this, okay? Good, we have an understanding and an agreement. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is rhythm, rhythmic phrasing. What I have is when a student first sits down in front of me, and I ask them to play something. Today, I'm just going to be playing over a few chords. Real straight ahead could be used for any style of music. And I'll just play something. And I have them play for me, and generally you get something that sounds like this. Now, I don't know where I'm at in the progression. I know you don't know where I'm at. They don't know where I'm at. No one knows. It's just this long run-on sentence of sound. So if nothing else, we need to bring our ideas down, condense them so they do sound like musical ideas. You would never speak like that. It would sound something like this if you were to speak like that, which I do sometimes, but I'm going to try not to do that today. All right, so let me give you a few examples because not only do I want to give you what it is, but more importantly, how to fix it too. You need to know how to train on these items. Just knowing, oh, I got to have rhythmic phrasing. He's going to tell me what it is in a second, but how do I fix it? Well, we're going to go over that too. So the first thing you're going to do is this. Be aware of it. Be aware that you're playing incredibly long run-on sentences. That's an easy one. The second one is to do something about it like this. When you're playing, if you are not thinking about the music you're playing over, you're going to end up with these long run-on sentences. So what we're going to do is provide a little space by having you play a chord in between your runs. Now, in this example, I don't want you thinking too much about note choice or ornaments or even trying to sound good. You're just trying to make space. Something like this. 2, 3. I'm not playing anything special. It's quite bland, but you're training on just trying to stop your sentence. You're trying to end it. If you don't get back to the chord in time, then you know you have run out of time and you need to adjust it. You don't have to have some crazy chord progression or do some intense special thing like I'm going to do this combined with chord tones, combined with ornaments. No, one thing, and that is this. 2, 3. That way, when you take out that little chord you're playing, you're going to end up with some nice sounding little phrases. I made myself a loop. There it is. Here we go. I'm just going to pretend I'm playing my chords. Already sounds better than. That's no good. We don't want that. All right. So number one, you've got to have very nice, specific phrases in time. Now, when we combine this one item with the next several, we're going to start sounding real good, real fast. So number one.
James, let me.
Oh, yes.
Let me interrupt you for just 1 second, because I know that I teach this something similar to this also with my students, and occasionally I'll get the student that comes and says, "Well, actually, I like the other way better. I like it when you don't stop." And there are some people who seem to prefer that. So the reason why I'm pointing it out is not to agree or disagree with what you said about that. It's that for those who are listening to this, and they might disagree with the conclusion that it sounds better to play in phrases that have a starting point and an ending point before starting the next phrase, there are additional benefits to practicing or improvising this way beyond the fact that you may or may not prefer it that way. And I know that you know what these are. So, but the point is, I wanted to just state this, because I know there's going to be some people who think, well, actually, I like it the other way. But the point is, even if you were to, anyone were to continue playing continuously, you still can, and it's generally preferable, to make it clear that there's a start and an end to the first phrase. There's a start and an end to the second phrase, even if there's no gap between them. And I think what a lot of people do, and you were kind of getting at this earlier, it's just like, it really is like a run-on sentence, because everything makes it that way. And it's inserting the space or the chord, as you said, does help to ensure that the sentence does not continue, it's not run on. But when someone does want to combine, where there's no seam between phrase one and phrase two, it should still be, in my opinion, I'm sure you agree, that played in a way where you can point your finger at, this was the last note of phrase one, and here's the first note of phrase two, even without a chord or a space or a rest between. Maybe you can just address that briefly, and I'll just shut up and let you do your thing.
Absolutely. No, you've got a good solid point there, because what we're doing here first is doing just that, making simple ideas, and putting a space there requires you to finish the idea. Now, what you can do with these, I like to call them compound ideas, where you're combining idea after idea after idea, where it does turn into continuous playing. However, it's not all just the same bland thing. Here's an example of playing over that without stopping, but having an idea. Probably. Here we go. Now, even though I didn't physically stop playing, you could tell that there was changes going on. We're going to get to those in just a minute as well. So the purpose of stopping is to get you to understand that you must end your idea. And to end your idea, you must understand you have an idea in the first place. Otherwise, it's just, you don't even have to play the right notes, apparently. Hey, see, I'm doing improvising, so you should know this too. I reserve the right to hit all the bad notes I want to, and so should you. Because when you're doing this, there's no way you're going to sound great all the time, because you're working on it. So number one, complete your sentences. Finish your phrase. Now, going on to number two, because without your finished phrases, your note choice, well, without good note choice, your phrases are just going to sound bland at best. You see, when we're playing over chords, people are often just kind of running through different scales, and you're not representing the chord at all. So it turns into, there's no harmonic food in what you're feeding me here. It's just a bunch of nonsensical notes. So what we're going to do right now is represent the chords we're playing over. But I don't know anything about music theory. I don't even know the neck. It's all right. I've got your back. I'm going to teach you how to do this. But take the time, learn where your notes are. It will make your life a whole lot easier. So, the first things first. Chords are either major or minor generally. I don't want any comment saying, well, what about a power chord? It's neither. Or what about this? You get the main idea. No silly comments. So here's what we've got. With a chord being major or minor, you have a couple different options to play. First of all, we're playing over an A chord first. You hit the A note, and all you're going to play are two beautiful notes that go with it. The root note, which is A, the next note, which is 2 frets away, and I'm just going to call it the next note because we're talking about it in the most simple terms possible. And then the third note. This is the note that will make it major or minor. Now, the beautiful thing about these notes, the third note, is they are often not in the pentatonic scale, which makes them stick out like crazy. So guitar players, when they hear you hitting notes that are in the chord but not in the scale, they're going to say, hey, that dude's awesome. He's hitting notes that are not in the scale, but they're in the chord. People that don't know anything about music will go, hey, they sound awesome. That's all they know. It's going to make you sound better than the guy sitting next to you for sure. So here's how it goes. A minor. Easy enough. You find an A, go 2 frets and 1 fret. Major, Just find the root note, play every other note. This is how we play over every major sound right now. Root note plus 2. Minor again for D minor. Same as before. Okay, so when you're playing over A minor, that note is not in the pentatonic scale, which makes it cool. G, which is our second chord, that B note is also not in the pentatonic scale. Still not. When you're playing over a D minor chord, that F is definitely not in the scale. You hit it at any other time and sit on it, it's going to cause problems. But you hit it over a D minor chord, oh, it's golden. So here's our chord progression. A minor, G, D minor. Check out how much you can hear of the chord progression by only playing those 3 notes. So, example without them, I'll even try not to suck totally. I just won't hit the good notes. I'll just suck averagely. You don't hear any of the content of the chords. So now I'm just playing those notes. Here we go. Wait for it to come around on the guitar. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all it is. Oops. You can already hear that has way more interesting sound than just the scale. So hitting the notes of the chord are very, very important to sounding like you know what you're doing. Doesn't matter if it's blues, metal, rock, pop, country. Does not matter. We're trying to represent the chords that are being played. You can hear the chords in that, but not in this. Don't ever take this as that scale having a problem, or any scale is having a problem. What you're doing is enhancing the scales you're already playing, not replacing. There's enhancing, not replacing. So we need more tools in our toolbox, so when we're playing, we can just reach for these things, automatically get them. So, number 1, we had rhythm. Finish your phrases. Number 2, we have note choice, which is making something major or minor. Oh, it just sounds so cool. All right, let's just do a little bit of playing with those 2 things in mind. Now, going back to the rhythm, what we're going to do here is incorporate the 2 things, and I'm going to read that. Now, here's what we're going to do. Put the 2 things together, and instead of just simply playing through them, what we're going to do is repeat our idea. So, sounds like a complete phrase, a complete paragraph, if you will. Here we go. 1. I'll start that. Here's my phrase. We'll start off real simple. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if we were to only play that, well, it'd sound all right, but it's going to get boring after about Well, about that much time, however much time that was. We need to have a little bit of variation in these items. So, as you're playing, going back to the rhythm idea, having a variety of rhythms, as I said before, a compound rhythm combined with this will start to produce better sounding solos. Now, my students often get confused right away when I start talking about creating rhythms because they say things like, well, I don't know how to make a rhythm. I don't know how to write rhythms or read rhythms. Forget about all that. Just think in groups of notes. I will play a group of 3 notes. I will play a group of 4 notes. Then I will play a group of 3 notes again. Then I will be done. It's like rhythm 1, rhythm 2, rhythm 1, done. Finish it. Rhythm 1, rhythm 2, rhythm 1, done. Example, rhythm 1, 2, 1, done. By having consistent rhythm patterns like this, you can create a much, much longer phrase. People often say, I run out of ideas when I'm playing. As soon as I start playing for 10 seconds, I run out of ideas. This is one thing that will solve it, because what you're doing is you are extending time. Instead of playing over all these little individual measures, now you're playing over a great big 4-measure phrase. That's right. Did you want to say something? There, Mr. Tom Hess, I saw you.
No, I'm good. I hit the button on my mistake, so we're good.
Oh, very good. All right. So, compound rhythm. We'll go a couple notes, 4 notes, back to a couple notes, and we'll be done. I'll tell you what, we'll go over a nice, simple little A minor sound. Look at that. Can't go wrong here. Probably 2 notes. 4. 2 notes. Done. Just by changing up your rhythm patterns, you're going to have a lot more time in your phrase. So they're not just these little ideas. That would be an example of not doing that. Repeat thine self is a good rule to go by. Repeat your ideas, and you're going to have a lot easier time not running out of phrases. So let's see what we spoke about so far. Number 1, rhythms. Have rhythms, repeat the rhythms. Have space. Unless you don't like space, just play continuously, but at least finish your ideas, for goodness sakes. Second topic. Note choice. Represent the notes that are in the chord. If you don't know what notes are in the chord, simply hit the root note. A. If it's minor, go. If it's major, here's a side note. Blues players do this all the time. You want to know how they sound so darn cool when they're playing over a 12-bar blues progression? And they don't just play. They're hitting the notes that are in the chord because they are not in the scale. Example, A. A major. That note is not in the scale. D. Not in the scale. Not in the scale. But if we play them over a blues type feel, you can hear the notes. 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4. E. So, works for everything, which is one thing that I like. You go through these things with principal ideas, not get too specific and hung up on the actual riff. Go for it with principles. That will always lead you to success.
James, great stuff. I wanted to have you maybe expand a little bit on the third idea, the numbers, where you played a 2-note phrase, then you played a 4-note phrase, then you played a 2-note phrase, and then you finished the phrase. So I know that anytime that any guitar teacher gives an example, like you gave the example 2, 4, 2. Some people will take the example, understand that it's an example, and run with it and make all kinds of permutations and variations. Others, as you know, get stuck on the example and then take away from it. Oh, I've got to do 2, 4, 2. And of course, 2, 4, and 2 is just an example. It's a nice example, but it's just an example. So maybe you can give another example of another, numeric combination. Just play a couple of phrases in some of them, just so people can hear what it would sound like if those numbers would be different than 2, 4, and 2. And by the way, before you do that, I just want to tell everybody here live, if you have questions, write them in the chat. We'll answer as many as we can at the end and the time we have left at the end. So James, it's all you.
Right on. I agree. I hear that all the time too, where people are always stuck on the exact example that you give. So here's what I do. To this day, I do the exact same thing. I get a pen and paper and I write out things like this: 2, 4, 2, 3, 6, 3. And I just make a bunch of different sets of numbers. You don't even have to have the third number be the same. Here, I'll do this. 3, 5, 2. There, they're not even the same. But if you repeat that idea over and over again, until you come up with a new phrase, of course, that will sound much smoother. So playing 3 notes, 5 notes, 3, 5, 2, and done. 2, 3, Any phrase numbers that you can come up with will work as long as you don't do 17. Keep it very simple. I know that most people left to their own devices will make these long strings of numbers and different requirements. You must keep these things simple when you start off doing it. I want you to remember these words because they are so incredibly important. Are you listening? Pay attention. If you can't make 3 notes sound good, 8 notes will not be better. You have to be able to make 3 notes sound good. Oftentimes, long series of notes will disguise to you, not to real musicians, but it will disguise to you that it's good, it's fine. People always want more scales, more riffs, more licks. No, focus on making a few notes sound good, then add more, add more. Even as simple as a 5-note phrase, I often don't think of that as 5 notes. I'll think of it as 3 and 2. 3 notes, 3 and 2, 3, 2. End your phrase. You got to end that phrase. If anyone is wondering about ending phrases and how to do it versus not ending your phrases? To keep it really simple, if you're playing over an A chord, if you hit an A and stop playing, it will sound done. If you're playing over an A and hit a note like D or F, it will not be done. Don't get hung up on all the notes that don't end it. Remember, A will end it over A. That's all. A is A. Always remember. So if you take that sound that we have here, I'm going to not end it. You want it to end, don't you? Here it comes. Oh, yeah. As soon as you hit that A, we'll erase all of your problems. End your phrase. If it's in A, end on an A. There you have it. Good, 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 good. So, good points here and good additions. So since we're talking about all of these really cool things about making yourself sound better, we're going to go about dynamics here for a moment, because you're talking about dynamics. You have obviously pick loud, pick soft, but one of the biggest dynamic makers are ornaments. Slide, bend, pull off, all of that stuff that you have. The big five: slide, pull off, hammer on, bend, vibrato. Those are the big ones. If you have any note like this, sliding into it changes the sound of it completely. Listen to this. Not very cool. I'm allowed to miss. All I'm doing is hitting a note, sliding into it. If slides did not make a massive dynamic change, it would sound like, but it doesn't. So, imagine yourself playing a simple scale. Scale doesn't matter. Without any kind of ornaments at all. No hammer-ons, no pull-offs, no picking. And it will sound very, very tight. It'll sound aggressive. It'll sound cool. But then there's times where you need variations in your sound because you just played all these really tight, aggressive sounds, and now you want some nice variations. Little pull-off. Difference. Any kind of ornament that you can put in there, slide, hammer on, pull, will change the dynamics of that little individual phrase. So when I practice this sort of thing, I don't just simply go, hey, I think I'm going to work on some dynamics. I go for this again, and I'll write down pull off. And then throw on something. We'll throw on that loop again because it's working good. I'll just practice working out my pull-offs. Only doing pull-offs. Only pull-offs. Now, people often will take this time to do pull-offs a couple of times and then do what they always do. Here's another big point that you should write down. This is as big as the first one. Here is the first one I said, which was, well, I'll go right to the second one because I can't remember the first one off the top of my head, but I know it was important.
Rhythm.
Yeah, thank you. Is that if you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always got. If you practice the way you've always been practicing, you will not come up with any new ideas. You can't just say, oh, I should throw in some ornaments and then just noodle around. No, say, I'm going to come up with some dynamic phrases using pull-offs. Now I will do pull-offs for 5 minutes. Work that sucker and then play whatever you want. Have fun, enjoy yourself and all that. Got to make these part of it. So then I do the beautiful thing of combining thing. Pull off plus whatever, slide. And I write it down and I have a little list where I practice and it says like pull off, slide. And for a good amount of time, I'll start my phrase, start it with a pull off and end it with a slide. You're just training yourself on using ornaments effortlessly. End with a slide. Hear what happens next. Pull off. You'd have a lot of notes. Still end with a slide. Doesn't matter what happens in between those two things. Start with something very specific, end with something very specific. So you train your brain to do it. Now, if you have issues starting something like with a bend and ending with a slide, then you can guarantee that you are never doing that in your playing. If it's not happening naturally, it will never be there. So you have to put it in there. You have to inject it in like the Matrix. That's right. Got to put those things in there. So you're just able to pop them off whenever we want to. So yes, intentional dynamics is what we had on that little step. Another thing I want to put in as point number 4 is to play on a single string. See, when people start playing, they always go for the scale, which is, as stated before, a fantastic device, and you should use it. You must use it. We all use it. It's like playing a C chord, but not using this shape. Use the darn shape. It's there. But also train on not using the shape. Play the notes on a single string. You will play completely differently than if you play there. Here's a good reason why, is that every riff that you could conceivably make out of this scale, you have notes that are in the same spot that will always get the same treatment. Like D will always get bent if you're going to bend a note, but C rarely gets bent because it hurts. When you're playing on a single string, bend any note you want to, and it's going to work. So by getting out of the scale, you're always playing it. And by the way, this goes for the reverse. If you're always playing on one string, then use a scale shape. You get the point? See the principle there? Okay, but I just know that nobody's like stuck playing the same riffs because they're playing on a single string. Okay, so when you're playing on a single string, it changes the way you think about things because now you're seeing distances totally different. You see the distance between this and this and this. You get to put bends and slides where they previously were not able to. How are you going to slide from D to E? Not going to happen. Oh, magic. We've got it. So, playing on a single string will absolutely change the way you play. So, moving those things together, where you're playing on a single string, sounds totally different than anything I could play across strings. So we use our scale and use the single string as an escape hatch to get to the next area of the neck. If you have trouble using a single string, that's because you don't know your notes on the string yet, in which case, practice it. None of these ideas just happen. No, you've got to work at them. Remember, if you knew how to do it, you could already do it. So if you start playing, take any one of these ideas, single string, and you're like, dang, this is easy. I rock at this. I'm phenomenal. Go to something else. There you go. That's funny because those kind of statements come from teaching hundreds and hundreds of people. You're like, okay, go somewhere else. Do something else then. Combine it with something else.
James, did you just go over, was that 4 or 5 you just went over?
That was number 4, and
All
5
right.
was just simply building your solo up, because when you're improvising, if you're playing over a certain amount of time, like say 16 measures, you cannot just play the same thing over 16 measures. There has to be some sort of buildup. And you already know how to do it. If I said, how do you make something more exciting? Traditionally, not always, but traditionally, if I say, what would make it more exciting, more notes or less notes? Usually you would say more notes. What would make it come to a climax better? Would it be to go down or to go to higher notes? Traditionally, go to higher notes. So if you practice playing, over a 4 measure or 8 measure segment by starting off low and slow and then build it up, getting higher and higher and faster, and then just restart the process again. What you're doing is you're learning how to craft your entire solo. Okay, so when you're building your solo, keep it very simple. Start slow, slow notes, low notes, and high, fast notes. That's the starting point. Go the other way around, see how it sounds to you. Either way, you can't do the same notes in the exact same register, the exact same way for 16 measures and expect people to listen to you and like it, because they certainly will not. Yes. Is there anything you would like to add to that, or any point?
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important in this last one. I mean, it's all great stuff, but in terms of I'll draw a picture here. In terms of the length, when you're improvising, or when I'm improvising, or when I'm teaching other students of mine to improvise or write a solo, this happens more really with writing than with improvising, but it applies improvising. You've got music. The canvas of music is time. Okay, for painting, it's the canvas. Well, for music, it's time. Okay, so you have a start of a solo or a melody, and then you've got the end. So you've got this much time. It could be 4 measures or 8 measures or 35 seconds, whatever it is. So you got your time in which to do your solo. So if you're going to have a climax in the solo, it's useful. It's not a rule or anything, but it's very useful to plan out where in time is that going to occur. Is it going to occur right here, like in the Stairway to Heaven solo, right at the end? That's not where most climaxes occur, but that is where it occurs in that solo. Is it going to occur right near the beginning, and then from here it's all going to be sort of decelerating down from there? Or is it going to appear somewhere in the middle? Well, throughout centuries of music, most climaxes occur right about here, at about 60, actually it's about 61% of the way through. I'm not suggesting that you measure it or anything like that, but it's a little bit more than half, a little less than 2/3. Climaxes tend to build up this way, and then they resolve and come down this way. Okay, that would be a very typical, the most typical, in fact, climactic structure in time. So you don't have to do this, but it's useful for you to decide where is the climactic point going to be, anywhere in here. And then once you have made that decision, let's say you put it there, Then you start asking the questions that James, you were just talking about. Are you gonna go from lower notes to higher notes, or are you gonna do something else? Are you gonna go from slower notes to faster notes, or are you gonna do something else? Are you going to play more consonant pitches and then hear more dissonant pitches, or are you gonna do something else? Is it going to be softer dynamics to louder dynamics, etc.? You can go down the whole list of musical elements to determine what do we do to get from here to here, and then what do we do to get from here to here. And you hit upon a bunch of those things already. But the starting point really, I think, is to just simply plan out where is that going to be. From there, then you can begin all of the other other issues and questions that you just asked or you just were talking about, James, to determine how do we get there. So this is really a whole masterclass all in itself, and we can spend a lot of time on this. And in the past, I have at my live events. But that's a good place to begin. Is just where is this going to occur? That's the first question, and then the second set of questions is how do we build up to that, and then how do we resolve it after that? We could go deeper into this. You may have more than one climactic point. You may have, for example, if this is our timeline, you may have a false climax where there's a climax here where you're building up to this, but the real climax is over here. And then it kind of resolves, and then it kind of goes down like this. Okay. So very famous example of this, which has more than two climaxes or sort of false climaxes leading up to the big one, would be in Richard Wagner's piece Tristan und Isolde. It's probably the ultimate musical example I could possibly think of that does this. Anyway, okay, I'm getting a little bit excited and want to go deep into this, but I'm gonna stop here.
Oh, it's easy to do.
It's very I could talk all day about this stuff. So, James, we have a few questions here. I'll start with the question on Facebook first. Peter asks, how important is it to repeat a phrase, kind of like a short leitmotif? How important is it to repeat a phrase a couple of times instead of playing different phrases throughout the whole solo?
Well, as always, it does depend on what you're going for. Now, repeating an idea does something very specific. It ingrains either the rhythm or the notes into the person's mind. So here's a good example of that. If you take Purple Haze by Jimi Hendrix, the rhythm goes same thing over and over again. Changes. Because like I said, he followed my advice. He said, change it somewhere. So by doing the same rhythm over and over again, it gets it in the listener's ear and it makes it sound complete. However, when you're going, let's say we're going to a climax, we're trying to build up and we're building a big scale sequence. We're just flying on up there. Well, that's not it doesn't have the same purpose. You're trying to build up everything to get to a big climax and then boom, and then finish. So you're trying to get an idea in the listener's ear. Repeating it is a great way to go. And the best place to do that when you're starting off, like say a nice blues section or something, do it when you start playing. If you're playing a 2, 3, if you just started off any kind of solo just by going, it doesn't really establish any kind of melody, which is what you're trying to do. Here's the third main point that you need to remember if you're writing stuff down. Your job as an improviser is to make whatever you're playing over sound better, not just noodle on top of it. The solo in Stairway to Heaven made Stairway to Heaven better. The solo in Comfortably Numb made Comfortably Numb chord progression better. So you're improvising. Goal is make things sound better. There. think I answered that kind of long.
Yeah, and that last point, I'm not going to get myself in trouble listing a bunch of people, but the opposite is also true. You can have a song and then a solo comes, and you think that solo completely ruined that song. Let's get to that. Let's put that song into Pro Tools and edit out the solo so I can listen to it and not be annoyed. So that's also, in fact, one of my favorite bands has exactly that problem. Songs are great, lyrics are great, solos suck. Can't ruin almost every song. So it's a common issue the other way too. But you're right. It should enhance the song, not take away from it. I agree with you in that opinion. And I like what you said to Peter's question, Peter on Facebook, that you don't have to repeat the whole phrase and in its entirety. The example that you gave was you just took the rhythm using the Purple Haze example. You're just using the rhythm and then creating new phrases based upon that rhythmic motive without repeating the same phrases. So we could have done that, or Jimi Hendrix could have done that with something other than rhythm. He could have used the same pitches, but changed the rhythm or just changed the order of the notes. He could have used the same pitches exactly in the same rhythm, notes exactly in the same order, but played them over a different chord. Then you would have something which I call modulating pitch function, where the notes, let's say the notes are A, B, and C, they feel a certain way over the, let's say, an A minor chord, but then when the chord changes to F major and you play exactly the same notes, same rhythm, the feeling of the A and the B and the C note are completely different because the chord, its relationship between the chord and the notes determines what the emotion will be. It's not the notes themselves that determine the emotion. So there's a lot of different ways that you could approach Peter's question without literally playing the same phrase exactly as it first appeared. You could do that too, but usually it's repeating some aspect or element of the phrases that come up from time to time. Let's take a question here on YouTube. And this is from our friend David Schramm. How are you thinking about rhythm when improvising? You partially answered this a little bit before and then more after Dave asked this question. Well, you want to go a little deeper into this, tackle this a little bit more?
Well, rhythm while I'm improvising, I don't think about it a whole lot while I'm improvising. Okay. Now that's different than when I'm training on it. So when I'm training on it, I will work very specific rhythms, like rhythms that don't fall right on the beats, or stringing together rhythms that are just a little bit more complex or tricky. So I don't have to think about it while I'm playing. But the only thing I think about while I'm actually improvising over a solo is my brain will be listening to the music and saying, well, I need to make things sound more tense right now. So I'm going to pull out that rhythm I was training on that is off the beat, or that is really pushing the rhythm so it builds up. So while I'm improvising, not thinking about rhythm a whole lot because I practiced it a whole lot beforehand. I'm only thinking about the desired effect, which is tension, resolve, climax, these types of things. So
great stuff, and super great points here, that what you or I think about while we're actually improvising or composing a solo is different than when we're practicing or training. So we think about different things. I think Dave's question was really about when actually improvising, not when practicing improvising. So I'll assume that's where Dave was going with that. But certainly when you're practicing, you're developing your skills and you're practicing improvising or writing solos or whatever, there are lots of different things one could think about, and you could just choose one thing, rhythm being one example, or phrasing or dynamics or something else, note choice. You could focus on just that one thing, kind of ignore everything else for now while training, to refine your skills on this element, and then go and do the same thing with another aspect of playing or improvising. Maybe it's technical in nature, maybe it's vibrato, maybe it's something else. But then when it comes time to put it all together, you're not, hopefully, you want to get to the point where you're not having to think about all of that stuff. So this is my approach to answering Dave's question here is you want to get to the point where you're not having to think about this stuff at all. Not because you're ignoring it, but because this becomes second nature to you. You don't have to think about what chord am I on? What are the notes in that chord? Where am I on the guitar? What could I do with phrasing? How should I bend the string? What rhythm should I use? How long should the phrase be? You want to get to the point where you are expressing yourself in the same way that you would when you're talking, right? So when you're talking, you're not thinking about how to spell the words that you're using. You're not thinking really about grammar. You know what good grammar is. You could practice that in school or whatever. You're just trying to express yourself in the most accurate way you can so that the other person understands what it is you're trying to say. The guitar is no different. And that's ultimately what we're trying to get to, so that everything we're talking about today, or that James talked about today, are essentially tools. They're tools to use to help you get to the point where you don't have to think about these things, not because you've forgotten them, but because you can just intuitively do whichever of these you need to at the time. Just like when you're talking, you can raise your voice, you can lower your voice, you can look someone right in the eye and pause, make sure you have their attention. This is what I do, by the way, when I order a steak at a restaurant. Waitress comes up, just a little funny story. Waitress comes over, she's going to take my order. So the very first thing that's going to happen is she's going to pull out that pen and she's going to write it down, he or she. Because you're not going to just think you're going to wing this and remember this, and I'm going to sit here in stress while you mess up my steak. So we're going to start writing it down. Then I'm going to wait until I have eye contact with the waiter or waitress. And only then, when they are looking at my face, do I say, well done. I will have it. Well done. Okay. So that's the point. When that occurs, that waiter or waitress knows this must be well done. See, I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to emphasize. I didn't have to say anything. Those kinds of things are things that when you're playing guitar, same sort of thing. Same sort of thing. That's what we're getting. I see that was funny for Emily. All right, Emily, we'll have a steak together and I'll show you how it's done. Okay. Let's see here. Next question I wanted to get to is this one from Serenity. It's hard to follow. This is more of a comment than a question, but I'm going to turn it into a question. Yeah. It's hard to follow chord changes when soloing. How do you do it? Now, I cannot wait to answer this, but I'm going to let you take it first, James. You take this, and then I'll if you don't say what I'm going to say, I'll comment on the end.
All right. I probably won't say what you're going to say because, well, I'll go with this. First of all, when you're following chord changes, don't let yourself get overwhelmed by it, okay? You don't have to follow, you don't have to make this into a difficult thing. Number one, start by playing the chord change root notes only. So if you're playing A minor, G, F, simply start by playing A, G, F. Okay, now, the second thing is to do I call them overlays, where you're going to be playing it either major or minor. Take the A, make it minor, G major, every other note, F major. Then when you're playing over those, now, what we're doing is we're simplifying it a whole heck of a lot, because then we're just going to keep building on these things one at a time. So if we're playing over A minor, all those notes will sound cool. You have your first note, passing tone, and the third of the chord. there's one more point to this is once you feel comfortable just playing the root notes and you feel comfortable playing it the major and minor thirds, remember, at this point, you've already practiced playing the root notes and you've already practiced playing major and minor thirds over it. Then you can add in that fifth, which is just like a power chord. Now, at this point, all those notes, you either have the root, the third, and the fifth, which is the chord, or you have the ninth, which is a nice little passing tone in the middle. So you'd play over any chord progression using that kind of an idea. And as always, with any of these ideas, if you come across a chord progression, because this will happen with minor chords in that shape, sometimes these notes are better, is if you come across a note or a style like this and it just doesn't sound good to you, don't get hung up on it. Just say, oh, I don't like the way this shape sounds over this chord. I will not use it. And just continue the exercise doing these types of things. So root notes first, third second, and then, of course, add in the fifth. There you have it. Now, let's hear what you got.
All right. Well, I interpreted Serenity's comment differently. So maybe I misunderstood and you've got it right and I got it wrong. What I thought, and Serenity, if you're still there, if you want to clarify this in the chat, you can. What I thought Serenity was saying was, while she's playing, while improvising, she's having a hard time keeping track of which chord is being played in the background at what time. And that maybe it was difficult for her to hear or keep track of what chord we're on. That's what I thought. That's how I interpreted it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, Serenity, if I've interpreted your question correctly, but I'm going to answer it anyway, the way that I thought you were asking or commenting. So my answer was this. Every chord in the universe has a particular specific emotion. Okay? Now, an A major chord does not have a specific emotion. An E minor chord does not have a specific emotion. Doesn't that sound like I just contradicted myself? Yes, it does sound like I just contradicted myself, but I haven't actually. An A major chord, we don't know really what its sound, we don't know, we know what it sounds like, but we don't know what its emotion is. Why do we not know? Because we don't yet have context. The A major chord in the key of D minor sound or feels very different than the A major chord does in the key of E major. In E major, the A major chord is 4. It's the fourth chord of the key. In D minor, the A major chord would be 5, fifth chord of D harmonic minor. That's a very different sound. So when the A chord is 4 of a major key, it has kind of a sweeter sound most of the time. That will change depending upon what other chords or the order of the chords that are being played. But over in the key of D minor, it does not and will never have a sweet sound. It's going to have the sound of power, okay, and usually pretty dark and often aggressive. Not always, but often. Okay, so the point is this. Once we're in a key, major key, minor key, some sort of mode, something, all right, and we've got a series of chords, and those chords are being played in an order of some kind. You'll say you've got 4 chords, okay? Let's say we're in a minor key, and we've got these chords, 6, 4, 1, and then a natural 7. Let's say that's our chord progression, okay? So in the key of E minor, this would be a C chord, an A minor chord, an E minor chord, and a D chord, okay? So C, A minor, E minor, and D. Now that we know this, that this is our chord progression, these chords are always going to have a reliable, fairly predictable emotion to them. So this chord in a minor key, this sixth chord is going to feel a certain way. This chord is going to feel a very different way. This chord will feel yet another way, and this chord will feel yet another way. All of these chords have a certain feeling in this context. So when I'm improvising, I don't have to keep track of what chord I'm on. I'm not counting. I'm not saying, okay, measure 1, it's the 6th chord, and then measure 2, it's A minor, and then we have E minor for the 3rd measure, and then D for the last measure. None of that is occurring in my brain when I'm improvising. None of it. Instead, I know what this emotion is. I know what that emotion is. I know what that emotion is going to be, and I know what that emotion is going to be. I am playing by emotion of the chords. And the reason why I do it that way is for 2 primary reasons. The first reason is, 3 reasons. The first is I don't got to keep track of anything. I don't have to count anything. None of that has to occur. Okay? Just like if you're looking at someone's face and they have a facial expression, you have a really good idea what that means, right? If I draw you a picture, if I do this, okay, here's our face. Here's a face. Okay, you have a pretty good idea what that means. But if I do this, now you've got another different feeling about what that means. Okay? So the first was sad. Now it's like angry, right? Very unhappy. Like you're going to have a problem here. Like that's what that looks like, right? So you don't have to ask, hey, sir, how are you feeling today? You know. Same thing here. So that's the first thing. This will save you a lot of time. Second thing is, once you memorize what the feeling of each chord is, that's going to give you a strong indication of what you might do to play over it. So if I was in, let's say, D harmonic minor, right there on this chord, I'm going to play probably whatever is the most aggressive aspect of the solo, it's probably going to be on that chord. Most of the time, it's going to be right there. That one. All right. So if I'm on the 4 chord, that's going to be I'm going to play this in a much less aggressive way than I would this. All right. So when I'm improvising, I am seeking to match the natural feeling, the emotions of these chords to what I'm going to do. So if one chord appears to be more hopeful or triumphant, that would be the 6th chord in this case, I'm going to play that way over that chord most of the time. Not all the time, most of the time. When in the D harmonic minor or any harmonic minor key, when the 5 chord comes, that is the moment of badassness. Okay, it's badass, it's dark, it's powerful. So that is how I'm going to play over that chord. I'm probably going to rip all over it. I'm going to probably do heavy freaking vibrato. It's going to be that. Okay, over the 3 chord, I'm not going to play that way most of the time over that chord. You can. There's no rule that says you cannot play fast over the 1 chord or aggressive over the 3 chord. There's no rules about this. But how would you talk if you were having a conversation with someone, which, by the way, for me, that's what music is. Okay, it's me saying something to you. That's what it is. Okay, how would you talk to that person? This person's in front of you. How are you going to talk to that person? How are you going to talk to that person? How are you going to talk to that person? How are you going to talk to that person? How are you going to talk to that person? I'm going to talk to those people probably very different. You probably would too. That's how I approach improvising and writing solos. For me, it's exactly the same. So I know that wasn't exactly what Serenity asked, but she was asking about keeping track of the chords. These chords, in all chords, in a context, have a specific predictable emotion. It doesn't matter if you strum the chord, if you arpeggiate them. There are going to be some variances in emotion depending on how you play the chords. The chord itself doesn't determine all of the emotion, but the basis, the foundation of the emotion that is there is through these functions. Okay, so see, James, it's happening again. I'm getting all excited because I love this stuff. All right, see what happens. See what Serenity did to me. Okay, so anyway, I'm not counting. What's the third chord in the chord progression? I'm not doing that. That doesn't happen. Okay. Now, the reason why it doesn't need to happen is I have spent a good amount of time in the past learning to memorize what does the four chord in a major key feel like the majority of the time. Okay. Now, well, how deep do we want to go into this? We're running out of time here. Let me just say this. If the four chord is played in a chord progression, then the four chord is very predictably going to feel a certain way. But if the same chord is played in a chord retrogression, we don't have time right now to get into the difference. You can look it up if you want. Chord progression versus chord retrogression. If the four chord is in chord retrogression, it ain't going to be happy. Ain't going to be happy. You're in a major key and it's a retrogression. Here's an example. I wouldn't call that chord happy. It's not we're not at a funeral. It's not the saddest chord in the world, but that's not a happy chord. It's not a super sad chord, but that's very different than if we reverse the order of the chords. Same chord. Check it out. There's the four chord. Four chord now sounds happy, right? Or whatever you want to call it. Reverse the order. Not the same feeling. There's a different emotion. So the four chord in retrogression versus in progression will change the emotion. All right, that's enough rambling. Sorry about you went a little on there. I could spend all day talking about this stuff. And I do actually. I do talk about this stuff every day, all day, just not here on YouTube or Facebook. All right, James. Anything else to add to that before we sort of wrap up here?
Oh, just to say, well, number one is to make sure that when you do any of the ideas that you and I spoke about throughout the entire time, is to do it in isolation first. Just practice it on your own. Like you were saying about trying to figure out how a 5 chord feels. Sit on that 5 chord, play the snot out of it, do it all in isolation, and then you integrate it into your music. Don't just do it a little bit and expect it to happen. Every single one of these ideas, try to get as good as you can, and then bring it into what you're already doing. So that's the main point about all of these things I want to get across. And thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Yes.
Thank you, James. Great stuff. Appreciate you hanging out here and sharing all your advice and wisdom. You shared a lot of great stuff. I have, by the way, for everyone here live or who will see the recording later, I have a something you can download here. It's totally free. It's called The Secret to Adding. There we go. The Secret to Adding Fire and Emotion to Any Guitar Lick, even if you can't play fast yet. So what this is about, by the way, it's totally free. It's an ebook. You can download it right now at the link you see on the screen. And what this is about, it's about taking any guitar lick that you know, either one that you know from a song, one that you've improvised, one that you just made up, and making it sound better, not by simply changing the notes or changing the rhythm, although those things definitely help, but by learning to inject emotion into the thing that you are playing. Okay. A lot of times, and James hit on this a little earlier, very briefly, but a lot of times what people do, students in particular, is they'll play a phrase or improvise something, and then they'll go improvise the next phrase and the next one and the next one. And that's okay if you're playing for real, but when practicing, you want to take one phrase and refine it, extract the maximum amount of emotion out of that phrase possible. Not because you always want to play with maximum emotion, but because you want to have the skill, you want the ability, you want to have the choice to play with maximum emotion when you want to. And you may not want to all the time, but when you want it, when you need it, you want to have that skill. So this ebook will help you to develop that skill, something I've used with my students for years, and it's helped them become really good players. So, and I don't even charge them for it, and I don't charge you for it either. This is actually free. So, all right, very good. Again, James, great to see you here. Gav, great to have you here as always. Thank you very much. Let's do this again real soon. And for everyone here who was here with us live, thank you for the great questions. Check us up on our next Guitar Mastery Talk, and we'll teach you some more stuff. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, James.